Thanks, Sarah. All right, Mark, do you want to go over the agenda for today and then we can turn it over?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. Sarah and Molly are making note of who is attending. And since everybody is online with their names and we don't have anybody by telephone right now, we don't really need a roll call. We are going to spend the majority of our time talking about an employer-focused webinar. And we started that with some Jamboard ideas previously, but we're going to try and get all of that finalized. And it is, there's a more detailed agenda that was sent out with the meeting invitation that shows some of the questions we're going to ask and answer today. But to start with, we are featuring Kylan. Welcome back, Kylan. And I know you've been back for a while, but this is the first time some of us have seen you. Welcome to your new life.
Thanks, Mark.
And Steph, welcome to you. And the agenda may say that it's Kylan, but I understand you two are going to present together. So it is 12:03. We haven't fallen behind on the agenda yet, Molly. So go ahead.
So I just wanted to say hi again, everybody. When I agreed a long time ago to say that, hey, once we've gone down this path of this cohort model that we've been putting together, let me come back and talk about it. And since then, Steph, who actually is legit running the cohort versus me just being a supporting player, has joined this committee. So I'm going to let her lead this conversation, but I can chime in if anyone has questions about partnerships or anything like that with it. But Steph, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kylan, and thanks all for listening to me talk a little bit about the cohort today. I'm happy to give you just a quick overview of what the cohort's about, and then I'd love to share some of the sort of results or outcomes that we're seeing 9 months into the cohort. So the Corporate Coalition, in partnership with the Chicagoland Workforce Funder Alliance, launched a 9-month cohort program for employers who are interested in pursuing fair chance hiring. So the work that we've been doing with these employers is basically helping them think through the HR practices, the org change practices that they need to put in place to more effectively recruit, hire, retain, and advance fair chance talent. So it's a lot of like org change, human capital type work. We had 8 cohort members this year who joined us for the last 9 months. We met monthly for 2 hours in a hybrid setting, and every month we had a different topic, whether it was background check processes, the regulatory environment, communications, and org culture. All were sort of with the goal of being able to help these businesses either start a fair chance hiring program or grow or scale their current work. So we just wrapped up our cohort last month, and we already have a number of exciting sort of results to point to. I wanted to lift up that we have 3 of our 8 cohort members are actively pursuing fair chance hiring pilots now. So actually taking the steps to be able to bring on board fair chance talent. We have one of the 8 cohort members already had a fair chance hiring program. They've made the decision to expand their program to another location. And so they're doing that in partnership with a workforce organization who they built the relationship with over the course of our programming. Some of the other cohort members weren't as far along in their journey. They were, sort of listening in, trying to figure out what was realistic and feasible. So many of them are revisiting their background check process, figuring out how to make it more transparent, how to include information about the background check process, like in their job posting language, so that individuals recognize that these are companies that are looking for fair chance talent. And when Fair Chance talent applies, they know more about what to expect from the process. And then I think just a couple other things that we worked with our cohort members on is each cohort member identified 2 to 3 roles within their organization that they could specifically, sort of lift up for Fair Chance talent. And we worked really closely with them on rethinking those job descriptions, the skills requirements, or educational or experience requirements that were listed so that these job postings fit, I'd say, like better fit the inclusive hiring guidelines to appeal to Fair Chance talent. So lots of exciting work coming down the pipeline out of our cohort. We are going to launch our second cohort in January. So if any of you on the line know of employers in Chicagoland or Illinois broadly who would be interested in joining, please feel free to send them my way. I'm always happy to talk to companies who are interested in making these changes.
That's great. Can I ask you a question about it?
Yeah.
So are most of you just mentioned Chicago or broadly in Illinois, are most of the employers you worked with this time around Chicagoland, or do you have, is it more broad?
This past cohort, we had a pretty broad reach. We had some organizations that were, local family-owned manufacturers in Chicago. We had a global retailer who was launching a pilot in Chicago, but has, retail outlets everywhere. So we kept it pretty broad this year. I'd say one of the things that we noticed in the cohort was building relationships across cohort members was really important. And so it's hard to replicate that sense of trust and community virtually. You can try, you guys do a great job of it, but it's, I think like our goal this year is to get as many people in the room as possible, which is why we're advertising it more as like a Chicago land cohort compared to like a broader national one.
So to follow up on Molly's question, you would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you would welcome somebody, a participant organization from outside of Cook County, but you prefer in-person engagement. And then of course, that can be problematic, but especially before the pandemic, many of us were used to traveling to meetings in Chicago, traveling to meetings in Springfield, and WebEx or Zoom or Microsoft Teams has been very convenient and saves a lot of time and actually a lot of money. But so you would be, it's not going to be nationwide, but it may be more inclusive of other parts of Illinois.
Correct.
And what is your deadline? Does a business or an organization go through a formal application process, or do you have capacity? Maybe this is more of an opinion question, but do you just have a capacity to take those who are interested? Is your focus on large businesses? Just give us a little more context.
Yeah. So in terms of like who we're interested in, this year, many of our employers were large national, if not global companies. But we did have like a family-owned manufacturer, right? So we sort of like spanned the sizes. I think as we like look ahead, being able to have companies that once they get this right can have sort of a sizable impact when it comes to hiring is ideal. But we also know that some of the smaller companies might be a little bit more nimble, but I'd say if we're looking at smaller companies, we still want them to be 200 to 300 employees, right? Like still sort of like sizable, not super, super small. Industry agnostic. We've already covered geography. In terms of like criteria for joining, it's really just companies who are passionate about this, who want to do the work, and who have sort of sign off from leadership or the C-suite. We found that it's really critical to have leadership on board with this. Often there are a lot of important decisions related to things like legal and risk and compliance and sort of a company's risk tolerance. We're having senior leadership on board can help remove some of the barriers.
And then is it fee-based? Is a participating organization paying a fee to participate?
That's a great question. So for members, so I work for the Corporate Coalition of Chicago. Members of the Corporate Coalition of Chicago can participate in the cohort for free. It's sort of an added perk or benefit of being a member. If you are not a member of the Corporate Coalition, then it is a $10,000 fee.
Okay. And are you looking for participation? You mentioned that you already had in your first cohort, you had participation by those who had already implemented fair chance hiring. To the other end of the spectrum, some were there to listen and learn. Do you want businesses that have already been doing it? And is that important, or are you primarily looking for those who are listening and learning, ready to figure out their processes and procedures?
Yeah, I'd say we're looking for businesses. They don't need to have started practicing fair chance hiring, but we want them to come with an action orientation. Part of joining the cohort is setting goals as it pertains to being able to operate or operationalize a fair chance hiring program. So we want organizations to come with an idea of what do they want to get out of this program? What do they want to actually be able to say they're doing come September? And then we spend, in addition to the time with cohort members together every month, we also spend time doing one-on-one touch points with them to get a better understanding and customize the pilots or the programs, the process changes that they're trying to put in place. So I'd say they don't need to have made progress, but they need to come with the lens of we are going to take action and we want to take action. And that's one of the perks of joining this program is you get, in addition to the thought leadership and sort of the educational piece, you get hands-on consulting support from individuals like me, as well as thought leaders like Jeff Korzenik.
And my last question that I can think of for now, how can we help you?
I think keep this program in mind as you're out talking to employers. This is something that we would love to be able to see, we're aiming for 5 to 8 organizations to join our second cohort. So we're in active recruiting mode right now this fall. In terms of timeline, the cohort will kick off in January. So that really means that right now we're out talking to companies, trying to garner interest, answer the questions that they have, and then help them think about who from their teams should be participating in the cohort. Because it's frequently, more than one person. It's often sort of a cross section of HR, sometimes government affairs, various other members of leadership.
Sounds good.
I'll also just throw in kind of another little thing. Helping find the right employers and helping engage that is definitely the number one ask. But in addition, it helps that Steph and I are on this committee, but in general too, a lot of what this cohort does is also help the employers get connected with the ecosystem of resources that are out there. So, one entire day is about learning about how to partner with service providers and learning how to do those relationships and then making those actual connections. And so as new opportunities show up, particularly if they are in the Chicago area where we think a lot of our employers are going to be, but making sure we're just abreast of these opportunities. So if there's a new program, make sure Steph knows about it so it can kind of be in the list of offerings. We're very big with this cohort is that the corporate coalition and its other partners are not saying like work with this person, we're being agnostic, but more helping the employer see that there's a whole ecosystem out there of people who do this work, and it's just about finding the right one for them. And so the more that we know about, the more that Steph can help network them to the right partners, the better.
So maybe if I do talk to a business person who may be interested, maybe my next step is to say, may I have Steph Dolan and Kylan Decker contact you? Does that make sense? Because you're going to be able to articulate specifics a lot more than I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Steph is the number one contact. She's the one with all the spreadsheets and stuff like that. She knows she can tag. She's definitely the number one point person for this.
All right.
Yeah, and
There's
I
also
say, Mark and Molly, like what I might do after this is just send you sort of the overview we have of the cohort, just so that you guys have it in hand in case it
That'd be
comes in
great.
handy.
A point of sale piece is always good.
that's perfect. I was going to ask for that, but I realized I have my chat disabled in Zoom because we had a conference and I disabled it for the conference and then I did not re-click it. So if anyone's trying to chat, I'm so sorry. It's not I just enabled it, but it's not here. So I was going to chat you that. I'm glad that it just came up.
Okay. Thank you very much, both of you. That was great. I'm grateful for what you're doing and your focus on having an impact and, getting something, continuing to get significance. Molly, could you give us a quick review of our meetings, August meeting and quarterly meeting? And then if I think of anything, I'll jump in at the end.
Yeah, perfect. So for a quick review, I guess 2 months ago in August, we met as a work group and we got a lot done on a Jamboard to start looking ahead toward an employer-focused webinar in the winter. So we're going to continue that today. We made a lot of progress. And then we also planned for the September CPTP quarterly meeting, which I know a lot of you were at. Kylan, you were there, Antoinette was there. So we had a big day. September 13th, and there were tours. There was the full meeting. And so in the morning, there were 2 tours, one of Lake County Workforce Development, and then one of Legacy Reentry Foundation. And then in the afternoon, we held our quarterly meeting and we had some great presenters. Lake County Workforce Development discussed their various programs. And then we heard from the Rotary Community Corps, which is inside the Kewanee Life Skills Reentry Center. And we heard about their many programs and initiatives from individuals who were actually involved in those programs. And then Monica gave us an update on the Proud Grant and shared with us things to come with that. So, oops, sorry, I clicked the wrong screen. So following that quarterly meeting, we sent out a survey just to gain some feedback on what individuals learned, what went well, what they would change. And so we just wanted to share that with you briefly today. And so that you understand, what's coming up with future quarterly meetings in terms of where we're headed. And also just a summary for those of you who weren't able to make it of what stood out to attendees. So one of the questions we asked in the survey was, what was something you learned over this day of meetings? And those that were highlighted were those programs offered at the 2 tour locations, which was the Job Center of Lake County and Legacy Reentry Foundation. And then several people noted that learning about the programs at Kewanee Life Skills Reentry Center from actual participants was really impactful. In terms of what went well, again, pretty much the same thing as what people noted that they learned the most, the learning from those with lived experiences and then the tours. In terms of what could improve, we had a lot of attendees, which was a great thing. We had 50 plus people. And so we need to figure out a way to make roll call a little more concise. So we'll be working on that for our next meeting. And then another great idea we had was to create networking time within the meeting so that everyone can meet. That would also eliminate the need for such a lengthy roll call for everyone to announce where they work, what their title is, how long they've been doing it. So we do have a goal to build in some of that networking time, either likely toward the last like 15 minutes or so of our meetings. Finally, we asked about future partnerships, and Defy Ventures noted that they'd like to get involved in the CPTP either on a work group, to host a meeting as a member. And Mark, I know that you know more about Defy Ventures from your region. So do you want to give a little overview of what they do?
Defy Ventures recently, within the past year or so, established itself in Illinois. It originated in California. They work with individuals in custody. They are a not-for-profit organization with a staff, a small staff in Illinois based in various locations. And then they use a lot of volunteers. It's a coaching and mentoring program with a focus on entrepreneurship. But although many individuals in custody are interested in becoming entrepreneurs and have business ideas, what is taught is also going to help someone become a very good employee of another business or organization. So they have been conducting programs at various facilities in Illinois, including Kewanee Life Skills Reentry Center. And so I can provide more information. They welcome volunteers to work with them and provide training for volunteers. And as a volunteer, that is done on a group basis. So you're not sent as a lone volunteer, but you participate with Defy Ventures staff and other volunteers, and the programs they've had at Kewanee have attracted a lot of participation, and there's been a lot of graduates of that program.
Great. So that's our overview of what we've been up to the past couple of months before we dive into the Jam board. Are there any other, from people who attended, any other comments or anything that I missed including here?
Molly,
Just a quick comment. The Rotary Community Corps, they presented live by WebEx or Zoom, and they had each member, or almost every member, make a brief presentation about a service project or something that they are engaged in or have learned about. And the president of Rotary Community Corps, the membership is a wide variety of ages, people that have been incarcerated for a few years to people who have been incarcerated for 30 years. And the young president, relatively young president, told all of his fellow members that each one was going to make a presentation live, and a lot of them were really scared to do that and had never experienced anything like that. But I was impressed by how well they did, as each one took their turn and made a presentation about something. And being scared of doing something like that has nothing to do whether you're an individual in custody. That's just typical of many human beings. So I was really enthused about the way they decided to do it.
I was gonna agree, Mark. That was my favorite part of the quarterly meeting. And I was gonna bring up again, I did the minutes for it, that one of the members of the Rotary Club mentioned that they were looking for people to help with their Cisco programming for their digital literacy classes. So I just wanted to put that again on this work group's, radar, if anybody knows, or, just to keep it fresh in our minds.
All All right, Molly, let's jam.
Okay, so today, just always keeping our work plan central. We're gonna keep working toward the employer-focused webinar. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to stop sharing and put the link to this Jamboard here in the chat. It's always just like everyone's best guess if it works the first time that you click on the link. So try to click on the link, and if for some reason it doesn't work, just tell me. Oh my gosh, I don't have chat enabled. Okay, I have another plan. Anyway, Monica, you have your hand raised though.
Okay, I'm sorry. Before we move on, can you have Sarah repeat what she said about the digital literacy component and what Rotary was looking for? I'm on my phone and my computer and I couldn't unmute myself. So repeat what you needed just in case I may know someone who might be able to help.
And this, I'll have to double check the CPTP minutes, Monica, just to make sure that this is the correct information. I'm pretty sure it is, but one of the Rotary members presented on their digital literacy classes that they have at Kiwanee and noted the need for Cisco programming or more up-to-date programming for members of the Rotary Club or people at the Kiwanee Life Skills Center to have. I think that was in reference to some of the things that they were learning were maybe outdated, and we all know how fast digital literacy in the digital world goes. So I'll pull that part out of the minutes, Monica, and I'll send it to you. So it's not.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Okay, so what I did is I just emailed all of you the link to the Jamboard. So if anyone didn't receive it, just let me know. I think I got everyone. So if for some reason you can't access it, that's all right. I'll share my screen as well. But you should have that link on your email. And let me just share my screen with this really quickly. Is everyone finding it okay? Okay, great. I see a couple of you have already joined. That's great.
Yep, that worked.
Okay, great. This is really great because it made me go fix my chat right now. So this was a good reminder. Okay, so last meeting, we spent a good amount of time brainstorming on this Jamboard. And so we got through the first 3 of our brainstorming slides and we had a few remaining. So what we'll do right now is we'll review the sections that we got through. If any of you were not at the last meeting, feel free as we go through these first 3 slides to click over on the left to the sticky note and add a sticky note as we review them. This is a working document, so feel free. And then we'll give everyone a few minutes to review the slides that we didn't get to, and then we'll go over those as a group. And by the end of this, we should have a pretty good direction of where we're going with the employer-focused webinar. So our first question we talked about last month is, what questions do employers have that could be answered in a webinar or series? We discussed that we have gone through we have had some opportunities, such as through the sessions that were done in the spring with Jeff Abramowitz on professional development. But we thought, you know what, employers may have some more specific questions or want to hear more case study examples. So if we were to have a webinar series that was either pre-recorded or live, what might some of those questions be? And we had lots of brainstorms, but those were put into the categories of incentives to hiring justice impacted individuals. Something we called Get Ready, Get Set, Go, which looks at basically how do you get started hiring justice impacted individuals, accommodations, and then workplace culture and support. So looking at these, and I know everyone wasn't at the last meeting, do we have others to add, or conversely, is some of this already happening and there are resources already out there for this that would be easy to just pull on rather than creating something new?
Just sort of wearing my hat of speaking with employers who are interested in this, like a lot of the questions here are spot on. And a lot of the material that we cover in our cohort, like helps to address some of this. So just as you're pulling together the webinar, feel free to tap me.
Okay.
Whether it's for materials or speakers or whatever, like you use me as a resource, because this is like right in my wheelhouse.
Perfect. Thank you. Anything else on this one that we didn't discuss last time? Okay, so I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So this question focused on, should we focus on hosting one webinar, or does a series make more sense? And this was kind of based off of the Disability Work Group, which is one of our partner work groups. They hosted a webinar series on hiring individuals with disabilities, and they had a topic for each webinar. So we were wondering which one might work best for our purposes. And our group presented the idea of starting with one webinar, seeing how it goes, and then with the potential to move it into a series, with the goal of really emphasizing the audience of employers, making sure we get a good group of employers, we have good speakers lined up, and really focusing in on our target audience in terms of our marketing, which, that will take us a little bit of time because, for example, the contact list we send out workforce webinars for are typically workforce professionals, educators, community organizations. There are some businesses, but not as many as maybe we would like. So that was where we had left this. Does anyone have any additional thoughts on whether to host a single webinar or a series?
I think starting with one is certainly going to be more achievable. I really like what the Disability Work Group did. And I think ultimately we could expand beyond one as long as we have some type of topical orientation, compartmentalized, so that if we have multiple webinars, people understand clearly what the focus of each webinar is, because some may want to pick and choose depending on where they're at on the journey. And for those of you who maybe are seeing this Jamboard for the first time, I think on this screen and the other ones coming up, you'll see some color, and I don't recall that the color was significant. I think we were just all learning how to use Jamboard and thought it was cool to click on different colors.
I just kind of want to highlight too, I think starting with one is fine as long as you still really define what the topic is for that one. I think everyone's been to these webinars where someone says this is the topic, but because they spend so much time covering the broad spectrum, or they spend the first half kind of preaching to the choir about all the possible background things you would think you'd possibly need to know before you have this conversation. So just being really intentional about the subject matter and being able to go a little deeper than I think a lot of webinars often get. I think that's usually the problem with standalone webinars, is they end up being so surface level that everyone who went already kind of had bought in because they wanted to learn more, and then they didn't actually learn anything more because of where you kind of set the assumption kind of thing. So
yeah, good
point. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great point. And I think that may be an opportunity too, where, we pretty much maybe have a slide of intro overview, but we can send them some of these resources that already exist prior to the webinar and say, if you need a reminder, if you need a background, there's been this webinar series that goes over all of the overview, basic, however we define it, for you to watch in advance. And so, are we saying our audience would be an audience with sort of more than a basic level of understanding or with some background on hiring justice impacted individuals?
I would say more maybe like go with the assumption of someone who logged into this has decided that they are at least want to do this, and then maybe focus on like the how a little bit more. I think that's one of the things that usually that hasn't been done in a lot of the statewide kind of stuff, or a lot of the webinars that I've seen out there. A lot of it's usually still really important to make this case constantly, like the business case for doing this, or why should you do this kind of thing. And if that's a webinar we want to do, that's great, but make sure it's clearly labeled that. And then if you're gonna do a webinar that's about like, how do you do it, start with, hey, you logged on because you want to know how to do it. So let's start talking about how we're going to do it.
Yeah, I agree, and that sounds good. I'm glad we're recording what you just said. The looking at the more detailed agenda and the questions that you sent out, Molly, I think that the third bullet point, what questions do employers have? I think that to the extent possible, we should talk to employers in advance and help structure the webinar so that we know what interest is out there and what questions, and that could also inform our judgment as to how many webinars we have. Because if we have a bunch of questions from those who are ready to learn and take the next step, that could be one webinar. But if we have other questions that are focused on, here's my experience. We have a number of people who are justice impacted, who have lived experience, and now we need a deeper dive. That could be a separate webinar. And I don't know, I would ask all of you what you think about that. We are going to need to work on identifying potential employers or current employers, whether they be business or not-for-profit or whatever. And so as we identify, I think we do have an opportunity to at least ask, what do you want as a webinar participant? And maybe Steph, have you done that with your cohort? Did you engage them at the beginning or along the way with what do you need, or did you have a structure that you had already created that they just bought into but didn't really help design?
No, so we did like intake interviews with each of our cohort members last year with the goal of understanding what their current processes were, if they thought they had anything that was particularly innovative or unique that they could share, and what their challenges were. And then we crafted the curriculum around that. So I think that like reiterates the importance of going to employers to ask about sort of like, what are they interested in? What keeps them up at night when it comes to fair chance hiring?
Does it make sense then that our first step actually would be to create like a shared Excel sheet, and we list employers we know are either participating in fair chance hiring or interested in it, and then that's creating the contact list for the webinar, but also to kind of ask what their questions are, and like you said, what's keeping them up at night? Would that contact list be a first step?
I think so. And however, I think that would be a sample, and maybe it would be based on who we want to interview, who we want to encourage, and our initial webinar could be based on that, but then we could invite hopefully a much bigger universe for participation in the webinar, because you know, you're right, Molly. A lot of Wednesday webinars focus on workforce professionals, which has really been excellent. But now at the state level, we need to go to DCEO and ICCB and IDES and IDHS, because there's a lot of state level business contacts. And then to the extent possible, we can go to local workforce areas, and we could even go to chambers of commerce and IMEC and other organizations, because there's a wealth of information. And even, you know, a chamber of commerce may say, well, you know, I know chambers of commerce that they publish all of their members on a website, but if an organization, an association said, we don't want to give you our contact list, they could still be a source. They could help us promote this and send out invitations, so that we can get, I think that there's a lot of excellent business engagement, but it tends to be fragmented, and we need to know how to make use of it better.
For business outreach for actual attendance at events like this, I highly recommend you put together easy to drop into a newsletter or an email like contact information, and you provide it to people are not going to give you their email list when it comes to employers. But for example, Corporate Coalition recently hosted an event that had a lot of different, and so it was kind of the partners all got sent, here's the email template, and it is as easy as possible. So I, for example, facilitate a network of employer tables. So I don't ever email employers directly, but I have 12 different people that I email, and then they email all the employers, kind of thing. So just the easier you can make it for that, and then really lean into that, it works pretty well usually.
Good idea.
I know we've talked about this before, but is there a way that we could get on the business engagement committee's radar and do a quick 10-minute, you know, presentation of what this group would like, and ask them for feedback of because they may not be doing fair chance employment, but in their, you know, they would have a list of reasons why they wouldn't want to do that, you know, or they're afraid to do it.
Yeah.
That's a good idea, Sarah. And Jennifer Serino has been active on that committee, and there's others whose names you would recognize as well.
Okay, so for next steps, one that we just talked about would be to reach out to the BEC, the Business Engagement Committee, to learn their thoughts and questions regarding second chance hiring. Question. And then would the next be just to gather a short list of employers to then also contact to get their thoughts on questions, so that as we develop the webinar, we have this, you know, some of that feedback and input?
I think a good route too, Molly, might be reaching out to the business service teams at like IDES and IDHS and seeing, like, you know, who their contacts are that might be interested in talking to us, because that might be, if they're already, you know, involved with the state, it might be an easier sell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was when I mentioned our state level partners, IDES and vocational rehabilitation do direct engagement with employers. It's not to say that DCEO and ICCB do not, but ICCB perhaps could help us with facilitation with community colleges, because community colleges definitely do business engagement, even if it's more curriculum focused. But we're also talking, as Kylan mentioned, we're talking about whether it's government or not for profit, or even in the for-profit world, we're talking about opportunities for newsletters. So we can implement what you suggested, Kylan, with a variety of organizations, both state and local.
So I think in thinking about next steps, I think there's the, like, how do we get the right audience in the room when we're ready to actually present this? But I think when we're talking about engaging specific employers to help decide what to talk about, I think we probably already have enough of a sample between, for example, like Steph said, she's been working with a cohort and helping build the next cohort. So like she's heard validation that some of these questions we have on the Jamboard already are questions that would be worth diving into. We have some, even though like Craig's on the call right now, like we have employers on this committee who are able to articulate the concerns they either have or have had in this journey. So spending additional time going on and doing like focus, almost like a focus group kind of thought process of getting answers on what people are interested in, I don't think that's necessary. I think we have enough contact points to know, at least for like a first one, like we have some low-hanging fruit. We know people have this question and we know we can give them some answers on it.
Okay, I think that makes a ton of sense. So maybe one of our focuses between now and next month is to create our contact list and just have, I can send out actually a shared document or shared Excel sheet of just who we all need to be reaching out to. So like, who are some of these newsletter contacts? We'll list the BEC, business services, and be sure that we include, the person and their email, so that when we are ready next month and we have an idea of what our first topic area would be, that we have our list ready to go or when we're ready to market. Does that make sense to everyone or seem reasonable?
And so am I hearing consensus that we would start with one webinar?
I think, yeah, just make that decision, because by definition, it's if the first one goes well, we expand it to a series. So let's just start with one just to get moving.
And since it's the 1st of October, and I think maybe we touched on this at a previous meeting, but have it after the holidays. Did we reach any consensus on that, Molly?
Yeah, I think that was what we talked about with having it potentially in like mid-January.
Okay. Yeah, that seems to make sense.
And what I'll also do prior to our next meeting is I'll send out the topics we discussed, and I'll ask that everyone rank those in terms of which ones we do first or which ones maybe group together to make a topic, so that at our next meeting we can have some clarity around what our topic would be for that first webinar. Okay, let me see. I'm writing this down. So we had one more question in this Jamboard I wanted to go over. Okay, so we talked about panelist suggestions. We'll come back to that next month when we have a narrower focus about what our topic area is. But then, and this is, we started to have a list of who we will market this webinar to. I'll get this into, like I said, a shared Excel so that everyone can add who we need to make sure we're contacting to share this information. So then the last question we had was, do we want to pre-record the webinar and just send out the recording? Or do we want to host a live webinar? It looks like we had a lot said host live and record it for later.
Yeah, I think hosting it live and giving like the opportunity for Q&A is important. Because I bet a lot of the employers joining will have questions around the how. And if it's pre-recorded, their questions may or may not get answered.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. Okay, so in the next month, you'll get from me, well, sooner than a month from now, but in the next week or so, what you'll get then is the list of all the topics we discussed so that you can rank or put them together however you think may fit for a good webinar focus. We'll host the webinar after the holidays and we can set a date for that. I'll also send out in that survey some date ideas so we can select a date. And then let's see here. Oh, and then I'm going to send out a shared sheet to add all of our contacts for who we want to market this to, so that when we do have marketing materials, we're good to go with knowing who we're going to send those to. Is there anything else that's coming up right now that we haven't discussed that we should? Okay. That's great. I feel like we have a really good direction with that. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to share my screen again with the PowerPoint. All right, Mark, it's all yours.
Okay. This information is also in what Molly sent out previously. We are headed to our next meeting on November 7th, and our December 6th meeting will be virtual only. That year-end meeting does not feature a specific work group, but will be our year-end summary and talking a little bit about 2024. Does anybody have any other questions about anything? Any comments? Anything that you'd like us to know about? All right, I am grateful for all of you. Good discussion today. And if we're not together on some other meeting, we'll see you in a little over a month.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.